Brilliant. Right. Okay, I think I've just some of these names actually ring a bell from the last investigative journalism session as well, though. So that's really good to see. Welcome to everyone to this session on social media journalism. Just a quick introduction for myself. My name's Chris Chohan. I'm one of the SPA trustees here as well. So as I've said, we're going to be talking about social media journalism, and the panel that we've got today is Chandni Sembi, Cassie Cho, and El Rod. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let them take it away, introduce themselves, and tell us a bit about themselves as well. We'll start with you, Chandni.
Cool. So hi, I'm Chandni. I run the So You Want to Be a Journalist Instagram page, which is like a social media first platform, giving people tips on getting into the media industry and like media careers and things like that. And then as part of my day job, I work for Channel 5 on their social media page. So that's kind of just creating assets and videos and stuff across Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube.
Brilliant. And then over to you, Cassie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Cassie Cho. I am an independent journalist and audience strategist. So I used to work at BuzzFeed News and also at Bloomberg Quick Take as an audience development editor. I'm also the founder and editor-in-chief of Almost, which is an Instagram-first social media, a media outlet focused on telling world news stories for young people. And I also work as an audience consultant on the side, and I work kind of with companies such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. I've worked with Channel 4 News, and I'm now working with Forecast News, which is a news company focused on crypto and also blockchain news in general.
Thanks, Cassie. And then over to you, El.
Hiya, I'm Elle. I am a senior social producer for metro.co.uk, which was one of the the fourth fastest growing national news website last year. My job contains a little bit of everything across multiple platforms. We schedule up our content for the day, but we also create specialized social media content geared at raising brand awareness, boosting engagement, and garnering people towards our website.
Thanks very much. And then I suppose the first question for the three of you would be as well is that for anyone that's starting out in social media and specifically that focus on journalism now as well, what would your tips and advice be for anyone that's starting out?
Sure, I can go. I think one of the first things that if you're just starting out is that it's super exciting because the world is your oyster. You can kind of do anything that you want to do. And one of the things that I was really I used to run the BuzzFeed at World Instagram at BuzzFeed, and so when I first took that account over, it was dormant with 50,000 followers, and this is around the time that Instagram was just kind of taking off as a platform. And so I really had kind of no idea what I was doing, but I just knew that I was really interested in social media, and so I was like, okay, maybe I'm just gonna like try some stuff and see what happens. So and then it became really cool because I was kind of like, I guess I have this idea, let me try and do something, and then let me try and make that a reality and see how that does. And so I think it's really important to just like experiment and just like make content. And because when you're first starting out, you're not kind of beholden to like 1 million followers who are going to be like, excuse me, why did you post something that was totally different from what we were expecting? And that is like such an exciting time to just like make content and then kind of see how the audience reacts. And so you can then look at like, I'm going to try this piece of thing that nobody's really done before. Then I can see how if people like it, if people share it, and if they do, that's really exciting. Maybe you can do more of that. And so, or if it completely flops, and then you can be kind of like, oh, okay, maybe it's because I did something, maybe I didn't frame it correctly, maybe I can do something different next time. And so I think one of the first steps is just to kind of like get started, which I think is always really difficult, especially when you're starting out and you're kind of like, oh no, what should I name my thing? What should I like? How should I like do my formats and stuff? But for me, when I started Almost, that was also kind of what I did. I was just kind of like, I was really like struggling with starting for like months. But then at one point I was just like, you know what, it doesn't really matter. Let me just like start. And then once you start, then you can really start to experiment.
I think another great thing to consider as well, because like you said, it's a great thing being able to experiment as much as you can. And I think definitely do that, see what you enjoy and see what works for you. But another thing I think might make people's lives a little bit easier is if they're starting accounts on multiple platforms, considering what's going to work the best, or like what single piece of content can you make that will work across all platforms. So if you think about how in Instagram, if you post in feed, it's one by one, and that kind of formatting also works really well on Facebook. So then that means you're not having to create a whole nother asset. If you're wanting to post on a different platform, you can use the same thing in a lot of different ways, which could just, especially when you're starting out, it could help you save a lot of time whilst making you feel like you don't have to create a million different things if you want to use a few different accounts.
And I guess I would just add to that by saying there's an old adage for writers, and the best writers are avid readers. And I think that really applies for journalism, especially social media journalism, where we don't just have to read everything that's being put out. We have to watch, listen, be up on the trends. Like the people from my university degree, and when I was starting out in journalism, the people that I knew back then who've done the best are the people that are always looking to consume all the content they can. They are subscribing to newsletters, they are reading podcasts, they are, finding the best long reads of the week, they are looking into the archives of the Guardian long reads to find things that, really resonate with what they do. They can, if there's something trending, they can remember a piece of content from a while back that they can bring forward, especially if when you're actually working. Reusing old content is always a great way to direct clicks back to the website, and then just by consuming as much content as you can, you are figuring out what does well. You can use plugins like CrowdTangle to see how it's shared on different social platforms from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, and you can see the interactions, you can see what does well, you can see how people have engaged, and you can kind of learn from that and just build up that base of knowledge to help you when you're brainstorming your own ideas.
And just touching on some of the bits that the three of you mentioned there as well. One of the things about social media and social media journalism, I suppose, as well, though, is that there's so many different platforms for people to engage with as well. So because there's such kind of like a broad scope of platforms, is there somewhere that journalists can start, from the very beginning, or should they be looking at a broad range of platforms to engage their audience?
I think if you're looking to just do what might be the easiest for the person starting out, I think use the platform that you use the most. So for me, in my platform anyway, I spend the most time on Instagram out of all the apps. It's the one I know how to use the best. So I thought that because I have all that knowledge already, I kind of know how the app works. It'd be a lot easier to get started on there. And like with TikTok, I should be on there more and I should know how it works a little bit better, but I don't. So that's not where I'm directing a lot of my energy at the moment, because I don't think that's where I could do my best work. And so I think if you have the freedom to kind of pick and choose, I would say definitely just go with whatever you feel the most comfortable with.
Yeah, and just to kind of build on that, as you kind of mentioned previously, you can start on the platform that you like the most, and then if you can make it so that the content also works on other platforms, then you may as well as you already have the content, you may as well as put it up on another platform. It's probably going to take you like an extra 10 minutes, but you never know whether something you do for Instagram may not actually do that well on Instagram, and ends up making it really big on Facebook, and then maybe Facebook becomes your new thing. Likewise, I also started with Instagram because that's where I've spent a lot of my time and a lot of my career kind of building Instagram pages. And recently I kind of was like, I'm making all these videos for Almost, why don't I just also put them up on YouTube? And suddenly actually YouTube is doing really, really well. And now I'm kind of thinking, maybe I should, start investing some of my time in making content, especially for YouTube, and then seeing how that kind of helps. And sometimes I think it's kind of like a journey where you discover things on the way. And sometimes, when you learn these things, you're like, oh yeah, I'm good at Instagram, but then it's like, oh, actually I can also kind of do YouTube, and maybe my YouTube is my new thing now.
And absolutely, just to build off what Cassie just said, and what Charlie just said, stick with what when you're starting out. So Instagram, Twitter, whatever you're most comfortable with. But whilst you're kind of looking to expand, but you're unsure, experimentation is your friend on social media. You learn, it's a baptism of fire. It really is. You've got to keep your toes in everything you can, but a post on LinkedIn or a post on Twitter, or a poll on Twitter, or trying to push things across Facebook, giving it a go, learning what you can and trying it, trying and trying and trying. And even if it's a failure, you will have learned something for your content, for your future. It's experimentation is your friend.
And then just on that as well, that working on various platforms to do with social media, is there any particular type of content that that people should be focusing their energies on when it comes to social media?
I think one of the things that does really well is kind of thinking about people stories, because people relate to people, and kind of when there's like a really complicated event, it's really hard to comprehend how it relates to you, especially if it's not somewhere that's directly, next to you or affecting someone but seeing someone who's been kind of affected by this or is involved by this is a really powerful way for someone to it's easier for them to kind of understand what's going on, because it's like, oh, we're all empathetic people, and it kind of triggers kind of more of like an emotional reaction. So whenever you're kind of covering something really like invisible, kind of like, Brexit, or if you're covering like Bitcoin or something, if you can think about a way that you can show a person who actually doing something or actually experiencing it, it helps people to understand more and helps people to be able to connect and engage with it more.
And just building off what Cassie just said, similar to people-led stories, you want things that are going to garner strong emotive reactions. So even if it's not like a person-led story, but a couple of months ago when we had all those influencers traveling to Dubai, that was content that did really, really well for us on a national, because it really irked people. And you want that reaction, you want that debate, you want people's anger. It sounds really bad, but if you want a reaction, if you want engagement, you want to elicit a strong emotion. And there's nothing stronger with people than anger, especially in like a jealous form where we can't go to Dubai, why are they getting to go to Dubai, etc. So if you can find something that elicits just sadness, anger, jealousy, also extreme joy, like Captain Tom, he did really well across national news, because it was a really joyful news story, and then it was a very sad news story, and people really got their, like Cassie said, they really got their empathy in there and really got involved with that. So anything you can do that will elicit a kind of emotional reaction will help you boost engagements.
I think just building off that again, like completely agree with what you said. It's interesting how anger and joy, they kind of completely different emotions, but you'll get similar responses from people. And I think, yeah, that's a great way to kind of get interaction, because I know at work, when at the end of the month we've kind of a little bit further from our targets than we'd like to be, posting something that's a bit controversial, not in a horrible way, not attacking people, but even something as simple as like, what do people have on a roast dinner? What do people have on their fish and chips? Because everyone has an opinion on that. And I think another thing to note is with video content or with picture-led content, you want to choose, like, it might sound really obvious, but just choose the strongest images, what you think is going to grab people. And a good way of trying to gauge that is just thinking what you personally would be grabbed by, or what you'd be like more inclined to click on. So like with videos, what we do is kind of have a few seconds at the start of the most impactful thing, even if that's something that would normally come right at the end of the story, just like a little teaser to grab people in, and then kind of starting at the beginning and going, okay, this is what's happened, this is the backstory, and then building to that later on.
Yeah, just to kind of take a step back from the tips that we've given, I feel like it's also really important to have a big picture idea of like your mission and what you want to cover. So if you say you're doing, world news, then yeah, obviously you want to stick to content that is world news. Then you think about, okay, how can I make it a people angle? How can I choose the strongest still? How can I choose something that, will get people talking and debating? So I think it's really important to make sure that, you maintain a cohesiveness to kind of your accounts, because people want to know what they're subscribing to when they follow you. And when the account is all over the place and it's like, oh, here's one controversial thing, here's like one people thing, and then people don't really understand. But having that kind of cohesive brand and kind of mission of like, okay, this is what I want to do and this is who I want to serve, will really, really help you to pick the type of content that you'd want on your social media platforms, and then kind of distilling it down through kind of the tips that we've given.
And just following on from some of the elements that you've all just mentioned there as well, though. So if you've got a social media journalist that's joined your respective companies or brands, what skills would you expect them to have, or want them to have?
I think for me as a newsroom, I think, you know, news literacy, any vague news experience is vital. That doesn't have to be working in a newsroom before, but if you can show us personal blogs, things you wrote as a student, your own work that you're passionate about, just so we know you have that kind of news literacy, so you are passionate about what's going on, you have that very much that kind of journalist, that news journalist inkling where you are always abreast of what everything that's happening in the news, and it's exhausting. It can be really exhausting, but you know, some kind of literacy with UK politics, especially for a national, what's happening on social media, but also big world politics stories are very, very important. So, you know, a lot of the time we're quite a young organization, I'd say, so we are always open to hiring you know, people just starting out, which is a really nice fresh way, especially for social media. But the big thing that ties everyone in is news literacy and what kind of content you've made on your own, and how creative it is, and how, you know, fast and what your priorities are with putting that out.
I think also just on that, it's great having, like, again, like you said, a kind of journalism inkling and just like the want to find out more. And not that I wouldn't say you need, like, I mean, obviously this is just my opinion, I'm not involved in any hiring processes, but I don't think a professional, like, or specific qualification is 100% necessary. But I do think what is really helpful is kind of knowing a bit about copyright law, and if part of your job is sourcing stuff, making sure that you're getting those things in the right way. And even if, like, if you're not doing a degree or anything like that, there are a lot of resources online, I think, where you can kind of learn a bit about what is okay to repost and what you'll actually need to go through like an agency or something else to get. And in terms of like practical skills, I think you don't have to be a wizard at Photoshop immediately. Even if it's something like Canva's a really easy thing to use, and you can get really like clean looking assets from there. And just kind of getting to grips with the basics of Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro, because a lot of places will have, like, they'll have their own templates for video and picture editing where you can kind of just drop things in. So I think getting to grips with the basics of those programs will go a long way, and making sure that when you start, you're kind of building on skills you already have rather than having to start from the beginning.
Yeah, I think having kind of like a visual, I like always thinking visually, I think is really good for social media in general. So it's like, okay, so you have this story, what is a way that we can kind of present this visually? And then also just kind of spending, so whether that is like, oh, we want to do a video, or like maybe we can do a photo, or we can do a graphic. I think it's one of the key skills that you kind of need in a social media job is to be able to distill really complicated information down into, like, I don't know, like 140 characters, or like, you know, or is it 280 now? And then, like, you know, looking at photos and saying like, okay, this photo really captures it, or how can I make a video or explain it in a way that is really, really quick and like easy to understand within like 60 seconds for Instagram, for example. And then the other thing is just kind of looking for, usually I'm always, if I'm like looking for interns, for example, I'm always looking for someone who's genuinely just like interested in social media and just spends a lot of time on it, whether it's, and just like Elle mentioned, like creating their own sort of content. It's not necessarily that, you know, they're trying to do it just to kind of get hired. They're actually just passionate about it, and they understand, you know, this is how people are using the platform, and they have ideas as to like, oh, maybe if we can do something like this on TikTok because I saw somebody else do it, and we can apply it in our own context, kind of thing.
And this is a question that I wanted to ask, because I've seen that a few people have got questions. So once I've finished this one, I'll get onto the questions that we've got in the chat as well. So I've been working with students that are applying for digital and social media jobs, because I'm also a senior lecturer at the University of Lincoln. So they've got job interviews coming up as well. And one of the things that they're asked about is identifying trends and using analytics. I was wondering if the three of you, based on what you know around that, could explain a bit about looking for those trends and analytics.
I think going back to, I think it was Cassie, you said at the beginning, spotting trends and stuff and immersing yourself in the app. I genuinely think that's the best way to kind of get a feel for those things, because as just like a user of social media, I think you're way more likely to spot if certain trends are popping up, like certain, even if it's like a meme and stuff, there are still ways to apply those kind of formats to the content you're making, and that can be a really easy way of making something that's really shareable and will get you a lot of engagement. But in terms of like actual softwares and I guess programs and websites and stuff, when I started out, Google Analytics was my best friend. It's really easy to see that way what people, because you can search kind of by certain areas, so you can see what people in your country are looking for, and if they're terms that are coming up and again, and things that have suddenly increased, like people are searching for them more in the last 24 hours, and that can be a great way to again jump on stuff, because if people are searching for it anyway, they might be like coming across your content if you can create something around that.
Yeah, and also I think you can also use, I mean, I personally just use kind of Google Sheets or like Excel. And so just looking at your own sort of how your own sort of content performs. So for every kind of post that I do, after a while, I go back and I check like the stats on it. And then usually I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that one to be shared so many times. I wonder what happened there. And then, you know, you can do some more digging and be like, oh, maybe it got shared by like an influential person, or you realize that a lot of, and using this can just be done through like the in-app analytics. And I can't stress like the importance of just like looking at the data and looking back to, it takes time to kind of like go through everything and be like, oh, this post did really well, this post did really badly. But by doing that, I usually like manually enter in all of the data myself, and then that helps me to process. And I say, oh, you know, take 20 minutes a day to do it, but it helps me to get kind of like a gut understanding as to like, oh, this is like the benchmark now. Right now we're doing averaging, a good post is 100 likes. You know, if it's doing under 50, something's wrong, kind of thing. And so you also start to notice kind of like outliers, and I think outliers are like super important when it comes to kind of working in social media, because if it flops, it's actually not a bad thing, because you learned a lesson, you know that it doesn't work. So that means that gives you the opportunity to try something else. And if it does really well, you can then try and do it again and then see if it does the same thing. And that's kind of how you're able to grow and scale. And you'll reach a point where you suddenly realize that, you know, things are working, and you'll know when you reach this point. And that's when you kind of look back on the data and you say, okay, this is all of the stuff that has done really, really well. Here are the trends, the big picture trends. And now let's just buckle down and do the same thing over and over again until, you know, we grow really, really quickly.
Yeah, and just to second what, you know, Cassie said there, absolutely. Once you get immersed in your own content, you will learn without even, sometimes, you know, we all keep, you know, keeping track of your analytics is vital, but sometimes you'll just be able to look at a post, look at the analytics and be like, oh, that's really bad, or oh, this is doing really well. You will know roughly off the top of your head, you know, and then just from there you'll be able to do like snap judgments and just curious things. And then bouncing off what Chandni said about you know, Google Analytics is your best friend. I would also really, really recommend getting into CrowdTangle and learning how to use CrowdTangle, because not only can you use the software to look at not just what people are searching, but what is clicking well on other. We use it to see what's clicking well for other websites, what topics, what stories, what, you know, exclusives we might not have had, or areas we might not have covered. And then you can also create dashboards, which are just, you know, similar to TweetDeck with the lists. It's just, you know, you can say like UK media, US media, UK tabloids, you know, left wing, feminism. You can make it really specific, and then within these areas you can really look and get really specific and look at what's clicking well and engaging well, and that can really help you when you're looking to source content for ideas, to know what you know, if you're a news organization, what you're looking for to do well out of the pile of content you've been given to go out on social. That will just really, really help you in general.
I wanted to jump back to what Elle said before really quickly about when you mentioned resharing content. I think it's also important to remember that some things, like not everything is going to be an overnight success. Like we've had content that maybe a month later has suddenly just gained loads of traction and is doing really well. But I think a good way to kind of organize your content is to use like hashtagging on Facebook and Instagram as well. You can kind of put things in playlists. So if you notice that, I'm just using an example for work, we have a lot of farming stories. So all of that is in one place. And so if one farming clip is doing well, it could be an idea to reshare another one or create more content. And the more organized it is, the more you can spot certain trends in your content. So if you know like a certain theme of clips are doing really well, and then if there is a trend happening elsewhere on social media outside of your accounts, if you have a clip or any bit of content that relates, then you can just push that out again. And it makes life a bit easier where you're not having to create a whole new asset if you don't have time.
Brilliant. Oh, Thanks for that as well. I think it's given me a bit of an idea around trends and analytics there as well, though. Right, I'm just keeping an eye on the time as well, though. I'll stop asking the questions as well. So we're just going to go to the questions that we've actually got in the chat. And we'll go to Phoebe first, please. Hi, Phoebe.
Oh yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. Sorry, I was a bit confused by that. So I had two questions, if that's all right. My first one was about like being like starting off really small. Like I literally write like a blog about documentaries and I post on my Twitter. And I think especially after this kind of conversation, I thought like, oh, maybe Instagram would be the best way of doing it because like it's all very condensed and then I can use pictures without it being like copyright problems as well, because I was a bit worried about that, which kind of links to my second question. But I was sort of just wondering, like, do you suggest when it's like really, really small, just kind of faking it till you make it, just keep on posting and following people that you think might be engaged and like that kind of thing? Or like, is it just sort of the determination that you do? Because I think I've got like 12 reads on one of my blog posts and I'm like, okay, cool, I get excited by that, but I know it's so small. But do you guys have any suggestions for that bit?
I think, yeah, Instagram is a great place, especially to find other people in the same communities as you. So, like you mentioned, following similar people is a great idea because you can find people with similar interests. And if you like their stuff, they might like yours. You can share each other's content, which is a great way to, especially when you're getting started, to kind of have your stuff reach more people. And this was, honestly, I don't know how much truth there is in this, but one tip that some people recommend is when you're hashtagging, choose ones that have been used between, I think it's 5,000 and 25,000 times, because they're a bit more niche. And so you're likely to have a good amount of people posting in there where you're not overwhelmed with other posts, but you can actually see other people in the communities and kind of, yeah, get to know people that way, I guess. Just as a fan of Instagram, I'd say maybe get on it anyway. It's a nice platform to be on.
Yeah, I second that. And I think that when you're starting out, so when I used to work at BuzzFeed, we were kind of playing with really big numbers, like lots of follows, lots of views. And now I'm kind of doing my own thing. And it's been really kind of like, I'm like, yay, we gained 1 follower, kind of thing. But I think it's one of the things that when I first started that people told me to do, and I found actually really, really simple and helpful, was I just told every one of my friends about it and then just asked them if they would be willing to follow. And then, because they were really excited about it, they were willing to do that. And so it's, even if it's just a matter of like emailing, kind of people that and be like, hey, I've started this new thing, would love for you to check it out, kind of thing. You don't have to like pressure them to follow you or anything. But I think organic word of mouth is so crucial and valuable, because there is nothing like, I guess, people value more than somebody else's like kind of a recommendation. And with the hashtags, I agree that niche hashtags work, but I kind of try to balance it out with a bit of bigger hashtags as well. So just in case one of your dog #dog video goes viral, that's great, because then you're also kind of reach a lot of people. So I think it's a matter of kind of, because you can get up to 30 hashtags, so you may as well just like kind of try and hit as many areas as possible and just kind of cover your bases as much as possible. And so one of the things kind of that helps is to also like be across different platforms. Like, as if you do already have content, then you may as well as put it up somewhere else. Just try and reach as many people as possible, for people to make it as easy as possible for people to find your content, if that makes sense.
And I don't really have anything on top of what Cassie and Shandy have said. There's excellent tips there. I would just say, if you're passionate about it, keep on going at it, because your passion and your love of what your content is will shine through. So when even just to start with, even if it's just 12 readers, those 12 readers will be like, wow, this person loves what they're doing, they know what they're talking about, I'll come back. And then maybe, especially with things like documentaries, which is things you discuss with your friends, like Cassie said, they'll turn around and be like, oh, I read this amazing blog post, or I saw this great tweet, or oh, I found this great infographic. And then organic word of mouth will help grow that, and everyone will be able to see, just from the way you write it and the way you plug your work, that you are passionate about it. And then from like a company standpoint, when we're hiring people, if we see someone who's got these amazing pieces of content that are niche but passionate, we are quite interested in that, because it's like, oh, they've got something that really makes them tick. Like one of the things, one of my colleagues, Ellie, she is in a fancy dress book club, and as soon as we saw that on her CV, we were like, well, that's fantastic. This is someone who's got a passion and she's making it fun and she turns it into content, and this is amazing. That's what you want to see. You want to see that little bit of personality, that little bit of passion, and using that passion and personality to make things is just so vital for social.
Sorry, I had another question. The muting thing's a bit weird. So I asked it, I think, in another one, and it got missed over a bit. And I think maybe someone else has asked something sort of similar. But like with an understanding of media law and copyright law, like before, if I'm not gonna, maybe I'll do like a master's or one of the qualifications or something. But do you think it's worth like finding like a textbook or a website, having like a bare understanding of it, and maybe even putting that on a CV and being like, I might not have a qualification, but I'm at least showing an interest in the fact that I'm not completely useless and I'm not going to get you completely sued, that kind of thing. Do you think that's worth it as well?
Just for me on a national, we need people to show that they have an understanding of media law, just what won't get you sued, what won't get us in trouble with the legal teams, what won't get us done for defamation and slander. I think, you know, in general, in the industry, it's just always really good to keep up with the basics of media law, especially with social media, where you know, social media and court reporting and the growth of social media in you know, sharing opinions and how that's affecting, you know, I think a big one's going to be the Derek Chauvin trial, where he's trying to get it overturned because he said there's no way that a jury could have gone into that unbiased. I think that might, if it gets heard, it could have severe ramifications. So things like this, even if that doesn't, it's coming, where people are going to have to talk about big cases on social media. So I just think having a basic understanding, there are plenty of websites. McNay's media law is you know, a godsend for my student days, and I still check it regularly. I absolutely, yeah, media law, going the basics, just where you can. It'll help you, and it'll be able to, it's great for your CV.
Yeah, I think an understanding of the basics is good, but I think a lot of places do end up kind of providing intensive workshops because, you know, we don't want to be sued for defamation or anything like that. But it'll also kind of just having an idea of like what you can and can't use on social media when, you know, you want to post about the story and that someone's posted, maybe it's a celebrity, then yeah, you probably can use it because it's a celebrity. But if it's like, you know, a person that just like an individual out there who you don't know, then maybe you may need to reach out for permission. But I think having that kind of basic understanding will really help you when it comes to, you know, someone comes to you and they say, okay, we have this story, how do we can we cover this on social media? It'll help you to kind of think about how can I get the visual assets that I need to cover this story. And so just kind of having an idea of like, you know, people, what people own and what people don't own, and kind of like fair use kind of thing, I think is super valuable. And obviously you can always ask like other reporters and journalists questions. And I mean, in newsrooms as well, there will always be like, you know, legal people who you can ask, and they'll make sure that you don't get in trouble for, you know, ripping someone's photo and accidentally defaming them or something like that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Phoebe. The next question that I've got, actually, it runs along similar lines in terms of copyright as well. Actually, it's from Kieran, and he's asking, where do you source images in a way that avoids copyright issues when you're limited in terms of either self-producing or using content from Creative Commons?
So one of the things that you can do if you're kind of stuck on kind of just using only Creative Commons, which is good, but sometimes you don't have the stuff that you want. So a lot of things that is just reaching out for permission. So if you're in doubt, just like ask for permission. So usually it's a lot. There's been a lot of times when I've reached out and I didn't think I was going to hear back, but then I heard back. So, you know, for example, you see a viral tweet and you're like, hey, I want to cover this story. This person has a really funny video. You can just like send them a DM on Twitter and be like, hey, I am a journalist. I want to cover your story. Would it be okay for me to like interview you and also, you know, ask for permission to use your photos, and we'll credit you, that kind of thing. And a lot of times people are very keen to share their stories. So I think user generated content is the way to go, because some people, if you think about kind of like news events happening, there's always people kind of on the ground because they just happen to be there and they want people to know about what's going on. And so being approached by someone who's like, yeah, I'm going to help you kind of amplify what's happening here, people are very keen to talk, and they're also really keen to kind of share their photography with you. Yeah, I think definitely try that. And then in terms of like, you know, politicians and celebrities, it's a bit easier because, you know, they're kind of putting themselves out there publicly, and it's usually it's better to check anyway, kind of if you have someone who like an editor or someone you can ask in terms of like, can we use this photo, without kind of reaching out for permission. And sometimes you will still have to reach out, even if it's like a celebrity or a politician.
I think that was yeah, 100%. If someone's posted something that's gone viral, literally it's as easy as just replying to the tweet and saying, hi, can I use this? But it's also worth checking if someone else, there are a lot of agencies who, if there is a viral tweet, they will jump on it immediately. And I think they license it or something, so you will have to pay to use it. But if you do fall into something like that, you can always just, if there's a relevant hashtag to, so say it's around a certain event, just scrolling through that and finding another video, because 9 times out of 10, there will be so many more people posting other stuff, which is just as good and it hasn't already been like snapped up by someone else. And with celebrity stuff, a general, like obviously this won't apply to 100% of cases, but a rule of thumb that I've had at work before is that if a celebrity's posted a selfie, or if it's obvious that they've taken it, then it's fine. But just be a bit careful with social media, because if they've posted the work of another photographer, or they've posted, if it's just someone else has taken the picture, then that photographer might actually have the right and it won't be the celebrity and they might want a fee. So it's just good to check. But like Cassie said, you can always just ask an editor to be 100% sure. Like, they're in every newsroom that I've worked in, no one has been angry about asking a question. I think they'd rather you ask and get it right than assume it's fine and then potentially something goes wrong down the line.
Right, thanks very much for that as well. Then going to move on to Kate for the next question.
Hi. So mine's about SEO. Applying for jobs and stuff, and it often comes up as we'd like somebody who's really comfortable with SEO, knows what they're doing. I didn't really know how much of it you can kind of organically learn as you're doing the job, because obviously it makes more sense when you're actually doing specific jobs in that, or if there's some good resources that you can go to, things you can learn, if it's worth having. Like Phoebe said about media law, if you can say, I'm doing this course because I want to know a bit more about it, and learn as you go. Just any resources you know of.
I think in general, I didn't really learn much about SEO. I kind of learned on the job, but in general, just kind of, I think there's a lot of information out there, and like just reading up on like SEO best practice is really good. And like a lot of it is just like pretty basic if you think about it. It's very like, it's like, oh, what would people search kind of thing, and thinking about keywords. And so I think a lot of it is just kind of reversing that, where it's like, okay, what would people search to find the story? And then thinking about how you can kind of make sure that it's kind of everywhere kind of thing. And obviously there are some best practices where it's like, yeah, you should have your keyword in your title, you should have your keyword as many times as possible in your article, that kind of thing. You should have longer articles, you should, that kind of thing. But obviously sometimes it's a little harder when you're doing kind of news content, because sometimes you have to kind of, there's no way that a keyword is going to make sense in a sentence or in a title. And so I think you do have to make compromises. But I think just having at least a basic understanding of how SEO works, kind of some of the tips that you need in terms of like, keywords and, making your URL the keyword, for example, stuff like that, I think is enough for you to kind of like have a basic understanding. And then a lot more like technical stuff. I think if you are looking to be in like an SEO writer or something like that, then maybe you would require like a bit more kind of training or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely what Cassie just said. If you can find a way, like do all your reading that you can on SEO best practices, and just kind of maybe use it to analyze, like pick a news organization that you want to work for and try and have a look at how they would do SEO. A lot of news like nationals have SEO desks where they just turning out search content to keep up those clicks. So just keep an eye on how they're doing that. And even just reaching out to an SEO writer and asking them a few questions. I'm sure they wouldn't mind answering a few quick questions over Twitter DMs. Like, if they have the time, I'm sure they'd be more than happy. If it's a social job and they've got like a bullet point on the job spec saying, oh, we would like you to have a basic understanding of SEO. All I would say is, if you can think of a time where you have used SEO, include that in your job application, mention that so they see you have a practical understanding. And then once you're in the job, be a fast learner, be a proactive learner, say, oh, I'd like to know more. They might be able to put you on a training course, they might be able to set you up with training with an SEO writer, an SEO editor, but you'll also just, if you're a quick learner, you'll learn it on the job, second nature. But yeah, like Cassie said, if it's an SEO job, then yeah, you probably would need a little bit more training. But aside from that, it's just immersing yourself and doing as much as you can.
Yeah, just to build back on that, I think it's more like if you were applying for like a social media job and SEO is required, you will not be kind of they will not be depending on you to write all of the SEO content. It may just be kind of like, oh, here's an article. How can we make it a little bit more SEO friendly? And then it's about kind of just providing the tips for that, and just based on like a social perspective, because I think a lot of reporters and writers have really used to focus like on print or TV, for example, and they don't necessarily have an understanding of how SEO works. And so just sometimes, it's just a matter of, I'm sure you've seen articles where you've been like, oh, they you can just practice and see an article and be like, how can I write an SEO headline for this that people would want to search, that has more, what would the keyword be for this? You can just kind of practice that on your own.
Brilliant. Right. Thanks very much for that, Kate. The next question we've got is from Lynn, and it was something along the lines that I was going to ask as well, but I'll let Lynn ask this question, and then we'll take it from there. Just going to see if I can. Yep, brilliant.
Okay.
Over to you.
Hi everyone. My name is Lynn. I'm studying a master's in journalism at Kingston Uni London, and yeah, my question was just how do you guys kind of balance between social media journalism, posting content all the time, as well as like just managing your free time when you just kind of want to do something social in your personal life, or kind of have a holiday, that kind of thing. How do you juggle?
I think boundaries are really important, especially when you're running a platform alongside a full-time job. Like for my account, I literally just posted before Christmas, I'm going to take a 2-week holiday, see ya. And people will always respect that, especially if it's just you running the platform, or if it's a small team. People 100% understand that everyone needs a break. It's not fair to ask someone to put themselves online 100% of the time and to always be available. Like, I'm always happy to answer any questions people have, or to offer help where I can, but I also really value that the people asking the questions, they're not going to expect to reply straight away. I have like even a day if I want to take take a bit of time off. And I think, yeah, working out what the boundaries are and how often you can post, and committing to that, because again, no one's going to expect you, if you're a small publication or again running it alongside something else, to be able to post 24 hours a day. Just it's a bit unreasonable, and I think if anyone tried that, they'd burn out super quickly. So I think deciding how often you're going to post, how big you want the platform to be, how much time you want to commit into there. And the social thing is really interesting, because I've experienced this recently where we've been allowed out again, and I've been going out in the evenings and stuff and taking days off to like hang out with friends. Kind of one thing that's really saved me is just being able to schedule stuff in advance. So you can do a lot of that stuff through the social media apps. It's really easy. You don't really have to pay for anything. But yeah, so if you want to take some time out, you can always just schedule a bit of content in advance so that your accounts aren't completely silent during that time.
Great, thank you.
I also I think leaning on if you've got colleagues, obviously if you're starting your own, it's slightly different. You can lean on friends and family, but if you've got colleagues, I think it's really important just to be honest with them. It's been quite a rough 18 months, I'm sure everybody knows. And there's just been a few stories or a few moments where all of us just get a little bit overwhelmed. So being able to turn around to someone and be like, hey, look, I'm having a really crap week. I am so overwhelmed. I'm burnt out. I'm due some holiday, but obviously I've got to get through to the holiday. I'm just being honest. And people, your colleagues 9 times out of 10 are going to be so on board with helping you. And also, I think identifying the stories that are going to hit you hard, because it's really hard as a journalist, especially as a social media journalist, where it's so immersive. There are certain news stories that are going to hit you hard. For instance, I was, knocked for 6 by the Sarah Everard case. It really spun me out. And I had a viral tweet around Sarah Everard. And I have never been so overwhelmed in my life. I had to turn off all my notifications. I ended up having like a weekend long break from the internet, which has never happened to me before. But like since then, I've learned the importance of being able to, I need to cover this in a work aspect. You need to kind of compartmentalize. Like, it was really upsetting. I need to push this out. I need to cover this. And then when I've done the bits I need to do for my job, I'm going to turn off my computer. I'm going to, debrief, decongest, and move on. And then just to bounce off what Chandy said with going out, I think boundaries are so important. I found myself the other day when the Derek Chauvin verdict came back, no one was expecting it to come back so quick, and I found myself getting texts from, we had a freelancer on the late shift when it was being covered, and she was like, I don't know what to do, and I was like, it's fine, I'm on my phone. And I had me and my friend, who's also a journalist for the BBC, we were leaning over the pub table listening to the verdict on the radio, like, you know, normal people do for football. And then while I was doing that, I was on my phone posting tweets and sharing, and it was what needed to be done at the time. But it's readjusting, and maybe in the future, you know, I'll be able to be like, hey, I'm having social time, I'm having downtime, I can't do this right now. It's finding those boundaries. There will be blurs, but as you continue through your career, you'll find what upsets you, what doesn't upset you, what works, how you can be flexible around certain things. And it's just playing with that, but being very strict in, you know, keeping your mental health and yourself safe and well is always the most important part. You can't post good content, you can't be a good employee, you can't be a good person if you are burnt out, and everyone understands that.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ella and Chandni have said. I think it's one of the things that kind of gives you a bit more peace is if you're working on platforms that aren't necessarily Twitter, which are very focused on like being first in news. I think, you know, thinking about the way that social media algorithms have now kind of platforms have moved in terms of their algorithms, even Twitter, I think, is now no longer so chronological. And so sometimes you're not going to, someone's not going to see something almost immediately. And so it does give you a little bit more time. Say you are out at a dinner and then, you know, Prince Philip dies, for example. This actually happened to me. And I was, you know, out with my boyfriend on our anniversary dinner and Prince Philip died. And I was like, okay, it's fine. I can come back and do this later. Like, it doesn't have, I don't need to break this news right now, especially if, you know, I'm just kind of starting out. But yeah, again, like setting guidelines for yourself where it's like, okay, every day I'm going to post one post, at least one post a day, unless something happens, which is fine. And then maybe on the weekends, I'm not going to post, or unless it's like a really breaking news event that is really essential to everything that I do. And there will be times when that happens, when, you know, you're on a day off and something happens that is like massive breaking news and you just need to either like cover it for work or you just do it for your own platforms. But I think you need to be able to make that clear distinction. So that is kind of why you have to have a really clear idea as to like what's important and what's not important in terms of like your brand and like the accounts that you're growing in. If you obviously, if there are shifts, then like definitely to hand off to someone else. And feeling, obviously I've worked in newsrooms as well where you feel like, you know, I've been covering the story, so I should like, you know, finish covering it kind of thing, and I shouldn't log off and I'm going to stand until like 10 p.m. just to make sure everything is good. But I think it's just kind of learning to trust other people and just kind of putting yourself and like your mental health above all else, and knowing that, you know, sometimes you will want to do this and that's okay, because you know, you really do feel attached to the story and you want to do your best and make sure it's reflective of the work that, you know, you have put into it and kind of reflecting the story in the best way, but also being okay with kind of like, this is not like, this is okay. My colleagues are also very capable and they can handle this, or, you know, this can wait until tomorrow, or being okay to tell a manager that, you know, it's 10 p.m., like I want to go home kind of thing. And I'm sure they will all be very understanding and be willing to help you out on that front.
Brilliant, thanks.
I just wanted to mention really quickly on big stories, because again, like Prince Philip and stuff, it's like royal family, big things like that. So at work in Christmas, everyone's off for like 2 weeks, or most people are in the team. So a way around kind of people having to like take time away from their families and stuff was before everyone went off. This could work really well if you have like a bigger team or even a few people, just having a rota. So everyone was on call for a few days, just so if anything did happen, then someone was around to cover it. So that way, you know, in advance, like, although you're not working, you might maybe have to log on for a few minutes just to sort something out. But yeah, I think that's probably a bit nicer than having it as a big surprise, because I know if something big happened like to me, I would be so overwhelmed and yeah, maybe not be like best prepared to cover that sort of thing.
Just to bounce off what Chandy said, yeah, absolutely, rotas will help. And if you're a part of a team and you have an editor, they will, you know, they will try and keep it as fair as possible. I do believe that. But kind of the expectation, especially if you're working in not just necessarily for a smaller platform or your own company, but if you're working for news, if you're working for a newspaper or a tabloid, if something big happens, for instance, a terror attack, it's kind of keeping that expectation that if things go sideways and like a major breaking war is declared, terror attacks, assassinations, like all these really big, terrible things that you never really hope happen. If they happen, we've had situations where, like for the Paris attacks, I know in my office, I didn't work there, but people were called in at 11 o'clock at night on their way to a party, and they were wearing Hawaiian shirts, and they just had to leave and go in their fancy dress gear and just crack on for a night. It sucks, but it's one of those things that you've just got to be aware that when it happens, you could be called in, and it might happen, and it's not ideal, but it's to keep that in the forefront of your mind, that if something huge happens, you could be called in at any moment.
Thanks, Al.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your question as well. And I did have a follow-up question on that as well, just in terms of tech, but I'm just mindful of time as well. So I suppose the best way to round this session off as well, though, is probably just from the three of you as well, if you can just maybe pass on one best bit of tip or advice that you would have for someone delving into kind of like social media. What would your one key bit of tip or advice be for that?
I think I'm going to echo what Cassie said right at the beginning and just say, or even like both of you just said, just get on everything. Experiment as much as you want, because I think that's the best way to find out what works and what doesn't. And at the end of the day, just try and have fun with it. Try and make content that you would enjoy consuming, because I think that's what will resonate with a lot of people. But just go for it, basically.
Yeah, my advice is really similar. I just think passion and tenacity, just keeping at it. You're not going to have a viral tweet or a huge Instagram post, or on your first try or your second try or even your 10th try. You've just got to keep on putting it out there. You've got to think about, rather than going viral, you've got to think about grow it. Steady growth is much more valuable to any organization than a singular viral tweet. So keeping at it, keeping going, putting out those interview requests, putting out those content, pitching ideas. You're going to get rejections. It's part of, I'm sure you all know, rejections are a part of being a journalist. You just gotta, it's going to suck for that, moment, let it bite, and then breathe, move on, next idea. And then, like Chandy said, experimenting, just keep on going. You've just got to keep on pushing, learning, trying, and playing with it and having fun with it. Playing is a really good way to put it, because if you are having fun and you're passionate about it, people will see that. And it's such a human app that if people can see that there's interest and there's that human spark, it works really well.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Elle and Chandy have said. I think it's super important to experiment, because that is one of the only ways that you come up with new ideas and how people find new formats, because they try different things. And thinking about kind of how to make content shareable. So like writing a tweet in a way that is like, yeah, I would retweet that, or like, yeah, I would want to share that with friends. So thinking about how you can make stuff that people would want to share, I think is super important. And a lot of that comes through just actually spending time on the platform. So, if you love TikTok, spend time on TikTok. Look at what other people are doing on TikTok. It doesn't necessarily have to be news reporters. Look at what like influencers are doing. Look at what if you are really into a specific niche on Instagram, go deep into that. You go into the hashtag, hashtag farmer life, and see what farmers are posting about, and think about how you can then apply that to like your own, reporting or your own content. And then there's always something new to be made. So like Elle said, just play on the internet, have a lot of fun, and just think about how you can, create good content for people.
Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks very, very much. And I suppose the last thing to say there as well, though, is just a big thanks, from us here at the SPA, and from the group that's joined us as well. It was really kind of like entertaining and engaging as well. So our thanks to Chandy, Ellen, and Cassie. Thank you very much for your time. Just a quick couple of announcements for everyone as well, though. So coming up. Wow, in almost just short of 5 minutes now as well. So in room 1, we've got how to prep for your first job interview. That's with Sky. And then in room 2, we've got unions and unis, negotiating tricky relationships with them. And then in room 3, we've got a reporting on disability. And then just a bit of a trail ahead as well, that we've got the SPA Awards, which are streaming on our YouTube channel. That's at 7 p.m. And I think we've got the links for those across our funnily enough, our social media platforms. So just to wrap up again, just to say a big thank you very much again for your time. And hopefully we'll see you again on one of the groups sometime soon. Thank you. Take care.